Hi, my name is Emma Hogg, and my new novel, Picket Fences, was just published by Tidewater Press. I grew up in Waterford. I lived there from the age of 7 through to 19 when I moved away for university. My parents still live in Waterford in the same house, and so I continue to feel connected to the town. Most of my stories include a small town, the town often a character itself, and in my mind, though I am writing fiction, pieces of Waterford make their way into my work. Waterford was the backdrop of my life for a long time and a very influential time in my life. And in a lot of the stories I write, I have characters who are young adults living in small towns. And so when I pull from my own experiences and memories to help feed my imagination to build these characters and settings in the most authentic way I know how, much of that inspiration comes from my time growing up in Waterford. I remember as a kid, I would go to the Waterford Library with my mom, who has always been an avid patron, and I would follow her into the adult fiction section, even though the books on those shelves were at the time too advanced for my reading level. And I remember being in awe of all the books on the shelves, the beautiful covers, the hundreds of pages, the thousands of words, the sheer number of books. And I would walk the aisles and drag my hands along the spines. I would take books off the shelf and flip through them. And I think it was probably the first time I had the idea that I could one day be a part of this, that one day maybe one of my stories could be a book on the shelf in such a special place like the library. When I completed my first novel, I had self-published it, and one of the first things I did was email the Waterford Library, asking if they would accept it into their collection and put it on their shelves. And it was Heidi Goodell who replied to my email, and I still have that email, and this is from 2008, I think, willingly accepting the book along with some kind words. So I have tremendous gratitude toward the Norfolk Public Library for being supportive when I was a new author and continuing to be supportive of my novels throughout my writing career. There are two books that I think started me on the path of really wanting to become a writer. The first was a short story titled Tear, Water, Tea by Arnold Lebel. And this is a children's story, one that my parents read out loud to me, about an owl who wanted to have a cup of tea. So he thought of all the sad things in the world so that he would cry to fill his kettle with tears so he could make tea. And it was the first story I remember that captivated me so much that it's lived with me all this time. And I was very young, but looking back, I think it was the first time I realized the potential power of words, how a story could have so much effect. That amazed me. The second book was The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. I think I was about 14 when I read this book, and it was the first book as an adult reader that really blew my mind. I remember being in awe of the characters and the story. I had never read anything like it. Again, the realization that a story, a book, a collection of words could be so powerful, could ignite and sometimes even change someone's feelings and beliefs and understanding of the world, to pull a reader in so forcefully and into an imaginative world, was really influential in my desire to want to try to do the same with words. I started writing seriously right after university. I had just gotten a job, but it didn't start for 6 months, so I decided I would take the time and use it to start writing my first novel. I didn't know if I could do it, but the only way for me to find out was to try. I realize now that this was a tremendous privilege, and I thank my parents who probably paid my rent during this time, but every day for 6 months I would wake up and write. And I grew up in a household of artists, my mom a visual artist, my dad a songwriter, my brother a songwriter and musician as well. So everyone was constantly and consistently working on their art in the house. So the idea of being a self-disciplined artist had already been normalized for me. So that likely gave me an advantage because I had already learned and understood what it took to be an artist. And in my opinion, self-discipline is the foundation of being successful at it. So during this time, I realized how much I loved writing every day as a lifestyle. And since then, I've worked full-time jobs unrelated to writing, but I continue to treat writing as a consistent ingredient in my everyday life. I write in the evenings and on weekends, holidays, vacations. It makes me happy. My new book, Picket Fences, is a contemporary story from the perspective of a 30-year-old woman, Sloane Sawyer. The themes in the novel explore relationships, marriage, family, friendship, millennial expectations, and ultimately, through the main character, identity. Much of Sloane's present story is stuck in the past. At 13, she meets her best friend, Steffi Harrington, and this is when her story really begins. On the first day of grade 8, Sloane slipped on a condom packet that had fallen out of a classmate's backpack, skidding into a wall and tearing a ligament in her ankle. She was on crutches for 2 weeks and became that girl who broke her leg on a condom. It wasn't how she had planned her first year as a teenager to begin. Any hope of making a friend was gone. That same week, the Harringtons moved to Tippet Valley. The Tippet Valley Times ran a profile piece on Joe Harrington, the new operations manager at the steel plant who had come from New Carlton, the city. Since Sloane was excused from gym, she was assigned to show the new student around. It took her about 1 second to realize that Joe Harrington's daughter was way too cool to become a friend. She was tall and skinny with long brown hair and a green-eyed glare that could melt skin. Her jeans had rips in the knees and she wore a black t-shirt with a violent downfall button pinned to it. Her fingernails looked like they were painted with whiteout. Outside the gymnasium, Sloane struggled to carry her backpack while maintaining control of her crutches. "Hi," she said. "Hey, Stephanie, right?" "Steffi," said the girl, picking the white from her baby fingernail. The bell rang and the hallways emptied. In some ways, it made being alone with the new girl more intimidating. In other ways, it was a relief. If Sloane embarrassed herself, there would be no witnesses. "I'm Sloane," she said. "My mom named me after Sloane Peterson, the girl character in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off." Steffi didn't scrunch up her face the way other girls did. "Have you seen it?" asked Sloane. "It's a pretty good movie for an old one, but still. In the movie, Sloane Peterson wears this white rodeo jacket that my mom apparently loved." "Shut up, Sloane." "It's considered a comedy classic. The movie, I mean. It was released on June 11th, 1986. 4 years later, I was born on June 11th, so that sealed it for my mom. I was meant to be a Sloane," she said. "Shut up." "My eyes are blue," she rambled on, "but sometimes green, depending on the light. It's the only cool thing about me." "You keep the condom?" Sloane teetered on her crutches. "What?" "You slipped on a condom, right? That's why you're on crutches." "You heard about that?" The new girl was already making fun of Sloane. "It's not even right what they're calling me," she said defensively. "It's a torn ligament and the condom was in a packet." "You got it?" she pressed. "What, the..." Sloane lowered her voice. "The condom?" "Did you keep it?" At first, Sloane considered lying, but then she wondered if Steffi was serious. She nodded, too embarrassed to admit that she had stuffed the shiny purple packet into her pocket. It looked so much like the lotion samples that arrived each month in her mom's magazines. She hid it in a ring box inside a dresser drawer. "Can I have it?" asked Steffi in the school hallway. "You want it?" Steffi asked for it like she was asking for a stick of gum, but it was a condom. For sex? Steffi squinted and half her eyes disappeared, which somehow made her seem even more powerful. "I'll bring it to school tomorrow," said Sloane, afraid to say no. She was now guaranteed to talk to the new girl again. As a teenager, Sloane had her life all planned out. At age 30, she hasn't realized many of those goals, and yet she still clings to these old ideas. She struggles to deal with her failures in the context of childhood dreams and doesn't recognize her worth and her ability to revise her future. Sloane checked her reflection in the mirror. Familiar flesh blotches patterned her face and neck, but she didn't feel like she was looking at her own reflection. She had lost the connection to herself. Even her prescription eyeglasses seemed like a prop. The big, red, round spectacles that had once made her feel hip and cool now made her feel like a fraud and a fake. What happened to me? She was supposed to have kids, a successful career as a graphic designer, a shelf full of design awards that her two kids begged to touch, and a house with a white picket fence. Not for the cliche, but because she really did like the look. Lifting her shirt in the mirror, she filled her belly with air. Does Jason pretend too? Alone in front of a mirror, did he mind pushing a buggy or rocking a baby in his arms? Did he still think about becoming a father? He had stopped talking about it. Worse, he didn't seem upset. It irritated Sloane how content he was with failure, how she had to carry the weight of not only her disappointments, but also theirs. Another important relationship for Sloane is with her husband, Jason. On their first date, Sloane shared something she had never told anyone. Sloane had never said these things out loud to anyone. She suddenly realized she was holding Jason's hand. When she moved to slip out of his grasp, he gently clamped down on her fingers. His thumb rubbed over her knuckles and she stopped pulling away. "What happened?" he asked, his voice a whisper. There was something about the way he was looking at her that made her feel like she could tell him the truth. If she turned out to be wrong and Jason never wanted to see her again, then at least she had tested the truth on someone who wasn't her best friend. Letting her thoughts have a voice was strangely cathartic, and Jason was inviting her to tell him the truth, to tell him her secret. Picket Fences is available for loan at the Norfolk Public Library. It can also be purchased online at Chapters Indigo and Amazon, or ordered from your local bookstore. Thank you very much.